Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Meet the Dean, MFA Screen Scoring and Music Design. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. You may ask a question at any time using the Q&A box on your screen. Please note this webinar is being recorded. It's now my pleasure to turn the session over to Shirin Sagafi. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Bailey. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our MFA in Screen Scoring and Music Design webinar. My name is Shireen Sagafi, and I will be your moderator today. During today's webinar, you will have the opportunity to meet our Executive Dean, Dr. Andy Hill, along with Carson Zuck, one of our scholarship recipients. Their conversation will provide you an overview of the program, share insights into the curriculum, student experience, and answer your questions during the Q&A portion of the presentation. With that, it is my pleasure to turn the presentation over to our Executive Dean, Dr. Andy Hill. Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shireen, for that very too kind introduction. It's now my privilege, I get to make an introduction here too, to introduce our first scholarship recipient, and he happens to be the Harry Gregson Williams Scholar for our first cohort of students, Carson Zuck. Now, Carson is a graduate of the Boston Conservatory and Berkeley's undergraduate film scoring program, and he has interviewed me before, which is why I trusted him to do this job. So Carson, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Andy. Again, another too kind introduction. And I just wanted to add on to a little bit about Andy, since he said a little bit about me. Andy brings 35 plus years of experience to the film and television industry, and was actually he's the former VP of music production for Walt Disney Studios. Got a Grammy doing so, by the way, and helped build, on top of all of that, helped build several screen scoring programs, including Columbia College in Chicago, Berkeley, Valencia, and the Film Scoring Academy of Europe, and now here at the Media Design School. He oversaw music production for films that earned 9 Academy Awards in the music categories, including for the film The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, and The Sister Act. I also discovered Andy through his book, Scoring the Screen, The Secret Language of Film Music. And I would just like to add that there is a second edition actually coming out in this upcoming January. So Andy, with that, I just want to say thank you so much for having me here. It's a great, great, great pleasure to be interviewing you. One of the first things that I noticed when I was looking through the program after you reached out to me is that you said it's built for the next generation of screen composers. Now, to me, that's a big claim. Can you go into that a little bit?
Sure. Well, a lot happens in 35 years in this business. One of the things, of course, is that you get older. But the other thing is that you see history passing before your eyes. And it's been my great privilege to work with 3 separate generations of composers. When I arrived in Hollywood, roughly 1985, 86, the generation that was most active was the generation of people like John Williams and Jerry Goldsmith. And then I was there in the 90s when a new generation came in that included people like Hans Zimmer and Danny Elfman, Thomas Newman. And I was still there as the century turned when a 3rd generation came in. And this is the generation that we think of in association with people like Daniel Pemberton, Hilda Gudnadottir, Daniel Hart, and so forth. You guys will be yet a new generation, basically. So you're coming in as the Zs, and you're going to face challenges that these previous 3 generations had not faced. One, obviously, is AI. We have to outfit you for creative battle in a world that is going to be increasingly characterized, I hope not dominated, but certainly colored by advances in artificial intelligence. Another thing I think is going to happen, we've seen the balance of power in the motion picture industry, and by that I mean television, I mean games, anything that lives on the screen, shift from Hollywood to Silicon Valley and other places. There's more and more influence being brought to bear by game studios and by companies like Netflix and Amazon that never had anything really to do with movies. And now they do. Now they're really sort of dominant. And the rules of the game have changed. Business models have changed. Composer contracts have changed. You all, if you're going to go out there, basically are going to have to be not only well armed, but really smart. You're going to have to understand more about contracts probably than previous generations had to understand. You'll probably have to understand more about business practices than previous generations. So that's what I mean. And I take it as a solemn obligation that we have to prepare you for that.
Yeah, and I think one of the best examples of how you're proposing to prepare us for this is by getting over the financial hurdle of going to a graduate degree program, of course. So I'd love to hear you talk about these scholarships. Of course, I'm one of the recipients, but there's 20 available, of course.
Yeah, this is more than a dream come true. And I'm going to tell you, speaking of dreams, years ago, many years ago, I had a dream. And in this dream, I was probably as rich as Elon, which of course is never going to happen. But I had unlimited funds at my disposal, and I used them to create a kind of a foundation, a retreat for artists. I actually think it was in North Carolina, which is odd because now we're in Georgia, one state south, basically. But this was a place where composers and artists of all kinds could come and essentially live rent-free just to develop their art. That was my dream. And I knew almost as soon as I woke up that was probably not going to happen. But to have a major American company say to me, what do you need to get this thing kicked off, Andy? What do you think? What do you need to get this thing rolling? And I mentioned a number of things, which we'll talk about, but I also said scholarships would help. I did not expect them to say, give everybody a full scholarship.
Here's 20. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is an incredible honor for me at this stage of my career and my life, to be able to look out there and say, somewhere out there, maybe tonight, in this group of people, is a really, really promising composer who's gone to see movies like Sinners and Gladiator and Everything Everywhere All at Once, right? And said, I can do that, but I don't have the money. I don't have the money to get the training. It's just an incredible privilege to be able to say, come on in.
Dude, Andy, I just got chills from that. I'm curious, have you ever done anything like this before? I mean, you've built up 3 other programs. Has an opportunity been presented like this before?
Not quite like this. I mean, in each case, there was an incentive given, basically, okay, we don't expect this program to be immensely profitable in its first few years. Do what you need to do, build what you need to build. And that was true at Columbia, it was true at Berkeley, and it was true to a large extent, even with the Film Scoring Academy, which operated with a much smaller budget. I don't think, I basically got one direction from the people who run this company, and that was build it right. And that's a marvelous thing. Now, of course, puts a lot of pressure on all of us to live up to that. But that's what's new about this. And we've also been able to build this kind of from the ground up, in the sense that every place else I've worked already had some sort of existing academic structure built around music. There was an existing music department. There was an existing program. This is really new, and we've taken over the first 2 floors of a marvelous building in Midtown Atlanta and ripped everything out that was there before and put everything new in. And at every step of the way, essentially, they have built it to the specifications that I gave them for a state-of-the-art, world-class screen scoring program. So yeah, that's new.
Yeah, and I think as far as I know, the classroom's actually being built right now. I think we have a rendering of, yes, there's the rendering of the classroom. The classroom's being built right now. So what type of software, hardware, equipment should we be expecting at the school?
Yeah, you're looking at a digital rendering, and of course these are always a little funny. Those aren't real people in the picture, but that's pretty much what the classroom looks like. I was just there the other day. It's not 100% completed. I would say maybe 70%, but it will be next week. And what you're looking at is a classroom that doubles as a composer's lab. And I asked them to build it, when they asked for references, basically, and we're talking to the acousticians and the architects and so forth. I said, this is effectively a screening room. And you have to build it that way so that it's isolated from the rest of the building. We can play the music loud if we want to. It needs to be 5.1 surround sound capable. Every student has to have a personal workstation with a 61 key keyboard controller and double monitors. Everybody has to have access to high grade broadband internet, all of that kind of stuff. Now, the other thing that they're doing here, which I've not seen before, by the way, we're asking the students to bring the hardware, but we're by and large providing the software that you need to get started. That's not something I've seen before. The students usually get a shopping list. Go out and buy this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to start you. We're not going to buy you Spitfire libraries or orchestral tools, but we're going to start you off with a subscription to the East-West Composer Cloud, to Museo. You're going to get the Contact Complete, basically. You're going to get Dorico for music notation. That's going to be our standard program. And I think there's a few other bells and whistles attached to this, but basically all of this is covered by your scholarship. So from the first writing assignment that you receive, you'll have the tools you need, the virtual instruments you need to complete the assignment.
Yeah, and it's certainly, I mean, I'm familiar with all of these softwares, of course. We use some of them at Berkeley, but the East-West specifically is a big plus. So that's more than you'll need to get the idea across to a director or for your projects for a live orchestral recording, which funnily enough is a good segue into my next question. So most of the projects that we're going to be working on, or in all of our assignments, are going to be leading towards what you guys are calling these soundtrack experiences, which are the live recording sessions with the orchestra. Could you just tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, soundtrack is a kind of a cute name, which maybe one day we'll be able to trademark, based, of course, on soundtrack and Star Trek. And we're calling it a trek because we're looking at this whole thing, this whole 15-month program as a journey. But, a journey, in order to be satisfying, has to be great along the way, but it also has to have a destination. So if you imagine a big wheel with live recording sessions at the hub and all the spokes basically leading to those, that's how this program is built. And you'll see that in a few minutes when you look at the curriculum. So you've got these capstone recording sessions at the end of quarter 2, at the end of quarter 3, and at the end of quarter 5. Now, for quarter 2, we're going to take you on a local trek to Nashville, and everybody will go and we'll spend, I think it's slated to be basically 3 days in Nashville recording with mid-sized groups, from chamber ensembles up to what we used to call studio orchestras. And that'll be your first taste of actually writing to picture for live musicians. Then there'll be a second soundtrack, which is virtual. We'll do it right from our classroom, the one that you looked at in the virtual rendering. We'll do it right from that classroom in Atlanta, and we'll be hooked up via Source Connect or like technology to a studio in Europe with a somewhat larger orchestra. And again, we'll spend the last week of that quarter basically working on that session. And then we'll do a couple of quarters of serious work to prepare you for the capstone session, which is where we'll bundle you all up and put you on a plane and take you overseas to a destination. It's yet to be determined, but I can tell you pretty much that you know the usual suspects. There's been a huge amount of traffic moving from Los Angeles, New York to Europe over the last couple of decades. Almost every major film composer, all the names you know, has done sessions in places like Budapest and Prague or Vienna. And we're looking at all of them. We're going to try and pick the best one to serve the needs of the program.
Lovely. And I'm curious, why do you think that the remote recording workflow is so important for us students to learn?
Because for the first maybe 7 to 10 years of your careers, maybe longer, that is largely how you'll experience these studios. You probably won't have the budget to go over there yourself. Now, it used to be, of course, that if you were doing a project in London or even on the European continent, everybody would go. The director would go. The director's girlfriend would go. The editor would go. The orchestrator would go. Everybody would be there. Now, increasingly, because this remote recording option is possible, the director can stay right where he is in LA doing post, right? Because he's got 1,000 different things to do and he can't afford to get on a plane. And he can simply observe the session remotely. And now, in many cases, the composer does that as well from his or her home project studio. And you're on the talk back, so to speak, giving instructions to the conductor or to the engineer, etc. You're just not physically there. And we want you to have that experience so you're ready for it when it comes at you professionally.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds quite different than what other graduate programs have to offer. I mean, of course, at every major university screen scoring graduate program, they'll have recording sessions, but it seems like there's quite a substantial amount. Do you agree to that? Is it more different or more similar to those other programs? Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I'll tell you how it's similar and how it's different. I think now most of the major programs have realized they have to give their students some kind of live recording opportunity. So, and this is true of Berkeley, it's true of NYU, it's true of USC. In many cases, however, you're limited to working with a student or training orchestra. When you are working with pros, usually session time is quite limited. There's usually not travel involved. So those sessions, for the most part, would be remote. And I think the thing to remember is this. Look, the goal, when you think about film music or game music these days, Assassin's Creed, you hear an orchestra. That's the sound of this music. Now, we're doing our damnedest to fake it, right, with virtual instruments, which is why you're all spending, all of your pocket money, on the latest Spitfire library, because you want to be able to mock it up authentically. But your audience, the filmmakers, the music supervisors, the top execs, they all have years, maybe decades of the sound of an orchestra in their head as what they associate with film music. And we want you to carry that sound in your heads as you go out there to the battlefield. You may not be able to work with an orchestra this big for quite a number of years, but if you have the experience and you know what it sounds like, your mock-ups are going to be way better.
Right. So I might amend what I said earlier about this being a program that's geared towards live recordings. It really sounds like the program is geared towards these pitch-ready portfolios. And the way that you have those pitch-ready portfolios is by having the reinforcement of the live ensemble. Would that be correct?
That's absolutely right. I think first and foremost, if somebody asked me to describe this program in a sentence or a phrase, I would say it's a portfolio building program. It's 15 months of, Olympic training for a very difficult and very competitive profession that has the yield when you're through doing your 15 months, basically, that you walk away with a reel that is convincing, that the expression that I use is I want you to have a reel that no one can say no to, that can't be denied.
I like that.
They may not like your music, that's because Danny Elfman doesn't write like Hans Zimmer. doesn't write like Harry
Mhm.
Gregson Williams, doesn't write, certainly none of them write like Hilda Gudnadottir. So
Right.
ultimately it's going to be a subjective choice on the part of the filmmaker, but we want to make sure that the quality of your reel gets you up there. Basically, we're trying to put you a couple laps ahead in the race if we can by making sure that you leave with a quality portfolio.
Right. And I'm assuming that this is baked into the curriculum, yes?
Yes. When you look across these courses, basically, I hope you'll see a fairly integrated program. There are these four big pillars, right? Composition. Obviously, you have to be able to develop an idea. And musically, that means developing motives and melodies and signatures and gestures and things like that. Some of which will come out of the tried and true vocabulary of film music, and some of them you'll invent, right? But you have to know how to compose. And the first step to composing music for the screen is to be able to look at the screen properly, right? This is not like writing for the concert hall. You
Right.
will have a client, and the client will be the director, and oftentimes a big studio or a production company. So you also have to know how to interpret story. The second part of that is analysis. That's the second pillar. How do I know how to do that? How do I know what will work and what will get me fired? Well, you learn that stuff by exploring music that has been enormously successful, that has been watershed music, that's been game changing, right? And you examine those scores and figure out what made them work. What can I use? What can I adopt from this? The third pillar is orchestration. If you're going to write for an orchestra, you have to be able to voice it properly for that orchestra. And it's a lot more complicated than writing simply for a choir, for example, where it's just SATB, right? And the fourth pillar is, of course, these days, technology. And I talked to Rachel Portman not too long ago in an interview for my book, and she said, I am so glad that I didn't have to, walk that wire when I was coming in. I just wrote music. I just sat at my piano and wrote music, and somebody else, got it ready for the orchestra. Nowadays, of course, you have to be a producer, and you'll get hired or not based on the quality, generally speaking, of your technological skill, your technical chops. So that's number 4. Everything else is kind of seasoning. Conducting, music supervision, music editing, these are all kind of extra career paths that you can follow. But those are the 4 big pillars. And when you look at this curriculum, basically you should see there's one of those in every single quarter. And they all are designed to lead to the live sessions. So got a session coming up in Nashville. You're going to be learning in technology class, basically how to prepare your hybrid sounds for that session. You got a course in orchestration. You're going to be learning how to arrange for an orchestra of that size, all the way down the line. Everything is designed to function as we hope it will in your careers.
Yeah, so I'm curious because you just brought up conducting and score prep. That reminds me of a few of your guys' advisory boards, specifically Catherine Joy and then Emer Noon. Could you just talk about some of the folks that helped put together this program?
Yeah, and again, going back to my 35 years, sounds like a long time to you guys. I'm sure that's more years than most of you have been on this planet. But if you do your job well, and you do it with integrity, and you actually help people achieve their creative goals, you make a lot of friends. And I am very, very fortunate to have made and kept a lot of great friends in this business. And when I knew that I was going to do this job, I went out, I rounded them up and basically said, help me make this curriculum a world beater. So, of course, I went to Conrad Pope, who is kind of the dean of Hollywood orchestrators. And if you don't know his name, Google him, and you'll see all the other names trailing after him. John Williams, Howard Shore, Junkie XL, Alexandre Desplat. Catherine Joy is a Tasmanian composer who came over here, got her degree in music composition, then went out to the Pacific Northwest and studied with Hummy Man. film scoring. Now she's created a music production company called Joy Music House that has offices in LA, New York, and London. Marvelous composer and producer. David Sierra, New York-based composer, who, if you've seen any of the Ken Burns documentaries, the Revolutionary War, Vietnam, he did the music for those documentaries. Jay Weigel is a New Orleans-based composer who's done a tremendous amount of music for Tyler Perry, as well as other clients. He is a teacher. He is an orchestrator. He is a fine composer. And he's also the regional head of the Society of Composers and Lyricists in Nashville. Emer Noon is just a flat-out star. She's sort of the queen of video game music. If you've been to a game music concert, you might have seen Emer up there, slinging that blonde hair around and conducting with great ferocity. But she's also a composer in her own right, as is Alistair King. I brought him in because that orchestration pillar is so important. And Alistair is one of the principal orchestrators for Harry Gregson Williams. Seth Wright is another young star, and it's partly his inspiration that gave me the idea of putting music design in the title of the program. Music design started out as something associated purely with the game music industry. So the music designer was responsible for taking the linear assets from the composer and integrating them into the game engine. Now it encompasses a much broader area, and I hope our program is going to make that area even broader. And finally, Panka Kuniva, some of you may have taken her master classes or her workshops. She is also a fabulous composer. She's Bulgarian by origin, but she's been in LA for as long as I can remember, and just doing tremendous work. But I really wanted her in here as a teacher because she has just a great manner with students.
Yeah, and Andy, right before we wrap up and go to Q&A, can we talk a little bit about our faculty members?
Yeah, we just, for some of you who've been waiting anxiously to find out who your teachers were going to be, other than me, I'm so glad to be able to share this with you because it has taken a while, as it always does. You do a search, you look for the right people, you try to match them with your prospective students and with the location. I just mentioned Seth. Seth is basically going to be our course leader for everything that has to do with game scoring and adaptive scoring. And you probably won't meet him until the third quarter of the program, but he's part of our full-time faculty. Phil Simmons will be here through the entire 15 months with you. He will be the course leader for orchestration and arrangement. And I know the quality of his teaching because I worked with him for about 5 years on the program in Bulgaria. He's also a local Georgia guy and has a company called PAS Music, does a lot of orchestration and arrangement for local clients. And Demetrius Martin is our newest hire. Very excited about this guy. He doesn't have the credits yet that the other two have, but what he has is an extraordinarily deep knowledge base. He not only got his undergraduate degree in music technology, he then went and got a master's degree in film. And that was probably what turned the corner for him. I think the fact that he understands cinema, he understands story, is what brought him in. But he's going to be our course leader in all the tech courses. And of course, there will be many others, special guests, visiting composers, including the people you saw on the advisory board. Over the years, I've been blessed to have people like Howard Shore and Danny Elfman in the classroom, with me doing master classes. And oftentimes they can't be there in person, but you'll meet a lot of folks. And our motto is that we're bringing the industry to the classroom and the classroom to the industry. We can't promise you a gig. That's up to you. All we can do is get you ready. We can get you all your battle armor on, and we can introduce you to people who, if you do what you need to do as composers, who will probably help you along with your career.
Lovely. Well, with that, Andy, that kind of wraps up my questions. I'm going to invite Shireen back in to handle the Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Carson. And I'm looking forward to having you here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Andy.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Carson. That was a wonderful overview and a lot of great information. We've had several questions come in from our audience. As a reminder, please feel free to submit your questions in the chat. Andy, our first question for you is, how do you think this graduate degree will better prepare I lost my question. Here we go. Better prepare the new generation of composers for the obstacles you described earlier, other than other programs?
Yeah. The degree itself is a piece of paper, right? Beyond that, it's a credential. It's an academic credential that shows that basically you can make your way through a very rigorous and demanding program without failing. And it's important for people to know that. It's important for you to be able to put that on your CV, your resume. The MFA, which is a degree we fought for, is Master of Fine Arts, is considered a terminal degree in this field, which means you can't go any higher. You can go and get a doctorate in musicology or music studies, but basically in scoring for the screen, an MFA is the top one. And we wanted to make sure that we were offering you that. And even some of the great programs out there like USC don't offer MFAs. Beyond that, it gets a little bit more abstract. And I would just say this to the question. Will a degree get you a job? No. Will it help? Yes. Again, it's a bona fide. They'll look at your resume and they'll see that and it will make a difference. But I think the biggest reason to do this, especially in an era where a lot of people are questioning the value of higher education, is that your peers, the directors you want to work with, the screenwriters you want to work with, the cinematographers you want to work with, are often going to be coming out of programs that grant MFAs. And you know what? People like to travel with their tribe. They like to travel with their pack. Like I said, it's a credential. And if you've got a director who has an MFA from USC or the American Film Institute, that degree is probably not going to hurt your chances of working with them.
Great, thank you. Andy, our next question is, can you talk a little bit more about the creative applications of AI?
Cool boy. Okay, so that is like a, first of all, we've got terra incognita, unknown country, that we're all going into together. And we're, as we should be, we're appropriately scared. Just like, when you were on one of those sailing ships in the 18th century, and the motto was, "Beyond this, there be dragons," right? Well, we don't know exactly what the impact of AI on individual artists or communities of artists, but we know that we want to be prepared. When we talk about the creative applications of AI, we're not talking about Suno or Udio. Although you may use them, they may end up being useful tools for you in sketching or sort of getting past the blank page. They're not going to give you the stuff that we were talking about earlier, right? But artificial intelligence of one form or another is everywhere these days. It's in all the tech that you use. And it's going to, what it's going to do, I think, I hope, I pray, is free you from some of the busy work, the housekeeping work, the spotting notes, the record keeping, all that stuff that you have to do as composers. Basically, there's no reason why you can't hand that off to an agentic AI and basically ask them to take care of that stuff so that you can focus on what you should be focusing on, which is the creation of music. I don't think AI is ever going to create that music for you. And if it does, I don't know. I wouldn't bank on that being, the answer to your prayers. But that's kind of what we mean. We are going to study it. We want you guys to know it. We want you to be able to deal with whatever impact it does have on the industry. We want you to be prepared for that.
Thank you. Andy, can you talk a little bit about the weekly expectations, the time commitment for students that will start this program?
Yeah, I know a lot of people are concerned about whether they can maintain a job of some sort, whether they can maintain outside clients. We tried to build a program to allow for that, but it is a rigorous Master of Fine Arts program. And as a consequence, I mean, you have to do the work. So there will be classes Monday through Thursday. You put them all between the hours of 10 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the afternoon, so that if you need to go out and work in the evening, you can do that. We're going to leave the 3-day weekend alone for writing. That's the main reason, but also potentially for work. And look, if you come into the program and you're a little older and you've been out there for a while longer and you do have some clients, it might be for advertising, might be public service work, might be indie feature work, that sort of thing. We don't want you to lose that, because that's going to be a value to you and to the other students in the program. But we also don't want it to cut into the time you spend doing the coursework for the program. So we just ask you to cooperate with us. We are organizing our schedule around you, and you'll need to organize your schedule around the program.
Great, thank you. So to piggyback off of that, can you talk a little bit more about the capstone project, and would they include live recordings like the soundtrack?
Yeah, well, your capstone project, for one thing, because this is a master's program, you have to do a thesis. But don't get scared, because this is not the kind of master's thesis you've heard of in a sociology program or a science program or something like that. You will write a paper, and that's important. You have to be able to articulate your ideas, because you're going to be working with directors. And those directors are often very literate people who, they're often screenwriters. And if you can't get across your ideas, your objectives in text without relying on ChatGPT, then you may not survive that long in this business. So yes, we do want you to write a thesis, but we're calling it something more like a commentary, because it will be a commentary that accompanies your music. Your master's thesis is music. It's your culminating music project. It's the music that you're going to put before that orchestra in Europe to record as the capstone, not only of the program, but of your portfolio. And this, the idea of the soundtrack basically is that you've spent the prior 2 semesters basically preparing this work for this particular session. Now it's going to be realized. There was a second half to your question, Shireen. Do you want to read that to me just one more time?
Absolutely. The second portion, would they include live recordings like the soundtrack?
Yeah, so that's essentially what the capstone is. I know it's a little bit, the verbiage is a little bit confusing, but capstone just means you've reached the end of the journey, and you're going to cap it off with a summative statement that basically says, not just to your teachers, but to the world, I'm ready, right? And in a science program, that might have something to do with biochemistry, or with coming to some new realization about medicine. In this program, basically, it's making a musical statement that accompanies a visual statement, a dramatic statement, and being able to say to potential clients that you're ready. So yes, the capstone of this program is the final soundtrack where we go to Europe. Now, I want to give you one anecdotal thing just to illustrate the point. When we first proposed this idea to the company brass, basically, what is that? Soundtrack, what does that mean? How expensive is it going to be? How will you pull this off logistically, right? Taking 20 students to Europe for a live recording session with a symphonic ensemble, that's a big deal, right? So I said, okay, so give us a dry run. Let us show you. that we can do this. And I had been in some discussions over the past year or so with the general director of a studio called The Forum, which is in Rome. Now, The Forum is the studio that was created by Ennio Morricone in the 70s. I hope you all know who that is. And if you don't, go out and Google him right away too, right? But he and his partners wanted a place to work that was close to home. So they built a recording studio below the ground in Rome, underneath a Catholic basilica. Talk about having the blessing of the Pope, right? The studio is right there under the church. And long story short, I've been in some discussions with these folks about doing session work there. And I pitched this. I said, wouldn't it be amazing if we could take a select group of composers to Rome and have them all record a piece of music based on the objectives of this program? That's why your scholarship is called the New Era Scholarship, because the name of the piece of music, the brief that these 5 composers were given, is write an anthem for a new era. You got like 2.5, 3 minutes with the orchestra, right? That's enough to make a statement. So write us an anthem for a new era that expresses, that articulates the vision of this program for training a new generation of composers. And, you know, I mean, you have to cross your fingers and hold your breath and say a few Hail Marys when you decide you're going to do something like that, because there's 1,000 ways it can go wrong. But when you look at the website and you look at that film, that's those 5 composers with their music on the stands in Rome. And we did that so that we could show you an example of what your capstone experience would be like.
Great, thank you. So I have 2 questions. The first one is, when does the program start?
October 5th, and you can count on that. You can take it to the bank. We had to move it a couple of times, basically because of location issues, but our building is ready, classroom is ready, we're good to go. October 5th is the date that you need to be sitting in that classroom. And of course, you guys are, I'm sure you're accustomed to pre-production. You have to do pre-production with your life, basically, because you will need to get yourself to Atlanta if you're not already here, and find a place to live. But we will be in business on October 5th.
Great. The second part of the question, can you talk about the remote to on-site ratio the students will have to work, the coursework?
Yeah, if I understand the question, I want to be clear, first of all, about the fact, because I know there are a lot of hybrid programs out there now, where a portion of your class time is spent, you know, online. That's not the case with this program. This is an old-fashioned, 100% on-ground, butts in seats. You're in the classroom, working every day with your instructors, getting mentoring and coaching from your instructors, interacting with your classmates. You know, the only time you'll have online instruction is if we have a master class from, you know, Danny Elfman or someone like that. They might be online. It most likely won't be in the room, although we're going to try and get some of those people out here. Now, if you're talking about time in class versus the time that you spend outside of class doing your coursework and completing your assignment, you know, I mean, that's probably 4 to 1 or 5 to 1. How many of you have had experience writing a piece of music for even a small orchestra? I don't know, but it's a time-intensive task. And you're going to get all your basic know-how in the classes, but then you're going to go out and you're going to do your own score study, and you're going to do your own film watching, and you're going to do your own game research and so forth, and your own writing. So I would say that you have to plan in a program like this, that for every hour you spend in the classroom, you'll spend 3 to 4 working outside the classroom.
Great, thank you. So earlier, when you were speaking with Carson, you talked about bringing the industry to the school. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
I think that first, it's two things. It's first of all that we are going to model professional practice throughout the program. So the assignments that we give you, the assignment briefs that we give you to work with, the training that we give you will all be sort of modeled on, okay, what's going on out there? It's my job and Philip's job and Demetrius's job and Seth's job to be constantly looking out there. And that's why we're hiring people who are still very much involved, both feet planted in the industry. So they're going to bring that knowledge to you, and we're going to use that to model the coursework that we give you. The other part of that basically is that we want as many people as we can get on planes or trains or buses or automobiles to come here. And this includes not just the big shot composers, not just the A-list, but also people who are working on a series, who are working, on the musical staff of a small game studio. We want to get as many of those people into the classroom as possible so that they hear your music. I remember being in Bulgaria with a student as Conrad Pope was there to prepare us for a session with an 84-piece orchestra. And he was going through, looking at the scores one by one of the students and listening to their mock-ups. And he got to one student, listened to the mock-up, looked at the score, and I said, this music will get you work. And he then followed through on that later with an offer of basically it was arranging and co-orchestrating work, not composing. But that's the more people you can meet who are exposed to your particular brilliance, the more chance that you can later call on those people once you get out of school and say, hey, I'm free.
Great, thank you. Now, the school being in Atlanta, will the students have the opportunity to work with the locals in the industry?
We certainly hope so. Look, we're the new kids on the block too. I only got to Atlanta in September, and the school, our facility has been under construction since the first of the year. So we'd have, we're just now moving staff and faculty into that building. But I'll tell you that I believe very strongly that a school has to dig roots in its community. And one of the reasons we chose this community is because it's been a destination city for film and television production since the 90s. And a major one, probably the major alternative to Los Angeles in the United States. People are also going to places like Bratislava and Budapest to shoot New York street scenes, right? Simply because it's less expensive over there. But Atlanta already has a production infrastructure. It has two enormous studios, Trilla, which is owned by the same guy who owns Chick-fil-A, and Tyler Perry Studios. And Tyler Perry is sort of the honorary Lord Mayor of Atlanta. He bought what had been a Confederate, Civil War fortress from the U.S. government and created a state-of-the-art studio that is stunning. It's mind-blowing in its scope and size. And we have had multiple meetings with Tyler Perry's people, with his production company, about this program, and we are looking to further integrate our activities with his. And that goes for not just big production companies, but smaller ones, local film festivals, local filmmakers. We're just beginning that process, but the short answer to that question is yes.
Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit about a post-graduation. Are you working on building industry partnerships so when students graduate, for them to have opportunities for internships or similar experiences? once they complete the program?
Yeah, schools are very sensitive and very careful because their lawyers tell them to be careful about anything that sounds like a promise of work. The closest I've been able to come to that was at Columbia College, where I was allowed to create an internship program, a summer internship program during the last term of studies for the students. And these were brief internships, 2 to 3 weeks, that kind of thing. I am hoping that we can ultimately do something like that, where, for example, if, let me just think of Anthony Willis, who you may have heard his music in Wuthering Heights and Promising Young Woman and so forth. He's a protege of John Powell's. He was John Powell's assistant for many, many years. Now he's an established composer. Anthony is a good friend and a colleague. Now, if Anthony comes into class to teach a stint or a master class, it would be wonderful if we could then say at the end of the program, one of our students will come out there and intern for you. And I'm not talking about paid internships. These would be learning experiences. Those things take a tremendous amount of time and a tremendous amount of care to build. And as I say, we're at the very beginning of our journey, but it's certainly my hope that we can dig pathways, channels for you. It's ultimately up to you, your music, your tenacity, your ambition to use that pathway. But what a school can do is begin to dig pathways. And that's basically all they can do. What we're planning on doing is creating a big database that keeps constant track, just the way like people keep track of the stock market, right? So at any time of day, you can find out exactly where all the companies you have, money invested in, how they're doing. We want something similar so that you can log in, basically look at this and say, who's looking for people? Where are there opportunities? Which composers are expanding the size of their studio footprint? Is anybody creating a new remote control productions? That sort of thing. We want you to have access to that information because information is power.
Great, thank you. Do you think someone who has a master's in music and film scoring will have an advantage over someone who has a master's in fine arts?
Well, first of all, you will have a master in fine arts if you do the program, right? Because that's the name of the degree. And, it's funny. I listened to both sides of the argument before we did this. There are people who said, Master of Fine Arts, why fine arts? We need to teach them craft. These people need to work. They have to have employable skills. Absolutely. And that's why there are courses in the program in things ancillary fields like music supervision and music editing and conducting and so forth. But I wanted the fine arts degree because, look, if any of you have read my book or looked at the book, you will know right away that I think of this as an art. I think of it as one of the most important American art forms of the last 100 years. And that's about how long it's been around. And I think film music has moved from the position of being a kind of handmaiden, kind of second choice to being right in the forefront. The skill of writing music to accompany dramatic action on a screen, and I don't care whether you're talking about animation or games or live action features, is an absolutely sublime skill, and it is an art. The business itself, there are a lot of aspects to the entertainment business that aren't so much about art, and you'll probably have to deal with some of them. But once you put pencil to paper or fingers to keyboard, right, you are an artist, and we want you to leave this program feeling that way.
Great, thank you. We're slowly approaching time, so I'm just going to ask a few more questions. Can you talk about the criteria for picking candidates for the scholarship and also the deadline, the application deadline?
Yeah, it's tough, by the way, when you are doing scholarships. Excuse me, I'm a little. This is hay fever acting up in my throat. When you're doing scholarships, it's both a blessing and a curse, because you can bring anybody you want into the program knowing that they won't have financial obstacles. So you can go out there and look for the very best, and we are in the same way we did when we did the project in Rome that I told you about. We looked to recruit the finest composers we could find to do this, and we are looking for people who have some background in music. You do need, yes, you do need to know how to write and read. However, I'll tell you something, that many top flight film composers, when they started in this business, they couldn't read in the alto clef or the tenor clef. Some of them probably not even in the bass clef, right? So, and yet they had extraordinary skills of innovation and invention. So we have to walk a line here. We have to look at your musical background, because we want to make sure you can get through the program. We don't want anybody to fail. But at the same time, we're looking principally for people who have a composer's instinct. You obviously, there are a few very practical things. You have to be able to be here in Atlanta. You have to be able to get your bags packed in time to start the program on time and things like that. But we're looking first and foremost for people who show the evidence of an original voice.
Great, thank you. Carson, we have a question for you. What made you choose?
All right.
Yes, what made you choose this program in this school?
Well, I think the most immediate answer is Andy. Again, I have this on standby just because you can't see because it blurs out my background, but it's Andy's book. That book had a huge impact on me. In fact, it's what started my interest in my career in film music. And then once me and Andy began talking, he started sharing a little bit more about the program, the faculty advisors, the scholarship. And it was just something I couldn't turn down. Any program directed by Andy is a program that I think if you're a young composer and you don't want to just learn how to sound like a famous composer, or what chord progression to use, if you want to get inside the mind and the art of what it means to be a film composer, Andy is your guy. And a program that is entirely built from the ground up with Andy's vision and all of the incredible recording opportunities, which is unlike any other program out there. This is definitely the program for you.
Great.
That's an incredibly kind testimonial, Carson. Thank you. And I know that you are going to live up to that in every sense. I hope that's true of everybody we bring into the program. And I'm very grateful to all of you who made time to be here with us today.
Thank you. This concludes our question and answer session. Thank you all for joining us today and for taking the time to learn more about our program. We appreciate your interest and hope you found today's presentation informative and inspiring. If you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If we did not get to answer your question, we will. Thank you so much again. And Bailey, back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. This does conclude the session. You may now disconnect.